Hello, hello again. A whole full day has passed for all of us, and we're here for session two. So good to be here because this is the actual part that I think we're most excited about, right? To make sure that we're discussing in the same way, to make sure that we're aligned. And the first thing that I want to bring up on this meeting is that um, the project will never have 100% agreement, right? Because of the human nature of what we do, meaning that we're here to interpret the human. We will never be 100% aligned on what we interpret just from a single piece of text, right? And from the discussions that we had in the meeting on Tuesday, now we know that it's complex, right? The origins of the words and the context considering the origins of the word and just from a broader context from which we sometimes uh, uh, take the meaning from the words that we are interpreting in the regular communication and many elements that when we're looking at the query we don't have it there, right? And that's our biggest challenge, is to be like a big mind, all of us in the project, ERs and SCRs and trainers and everyone involved. And at the same time, understanding that it's not going to happen 100% of the time. And even don't be wrong, right? When we're discussing with SERs and in consensus and super consensus, we see the same thing happening, right? We still have these agreements. So the thing is not that we won't disagree or that originally our individual bias won't play a role, but understanding how we align on how to approach each scenario, how to understand overall the quality of each of the offers that we receive for each of the queries that we are interpreting and evaluating how good the ad addresses all elements of the query. I mean, we need to put everything in a scale, and sometimes the answer is not as clear to us, right? And I think when we accept this truth, it's easier to move ahead because then we understand that sometimes we will disagree. And the important thing is that we have the right approach so that those disagreements do not play a larger role in the project, right? So, for example, SERs, one of the main impacts of ratings from SERs that you're probably always concerned about is regarding exams, right? I know, and I was also part of many exams, and it was challenging because there were some tasks, not only one, sometimes more than just one case, that we would have many reasons to question and to argue, right? So that's one part of the project, right? Making sure that on exams we have cases that we can clearly say it's rating X or rating Y, and why is it, right? But that's a different scenario because we're not only thinking about exams, we're thinking about AQR as a whole. And in the end, what really matters is that we deliver the best quality data. So even if sometimes for one eval I rated as good and the other okay, and 99% of the eval is pretty much comparable, but that 1% made me decide for a different rating. Um, and maybe I have a reason from the guidelines and a justification for that. and you would maybe have the argument of to say otherwise, that we needed to instead go for the okay, and not necessarily one of us is wrong, right? I think understanding the nature of the project is understanding that we will have evals in which we will face situations like that, and we have processes to follow to deal with that. We have the certainty, we have all of that, right? And yes, for sure, we don't want cases like that showing up on exams. For exams, we want more clear-cut cases where we can actually evaluate the interpretation of the guidelines. And as you most likely know, we're not involved in the selection of the exams, of the tests that goes to exams. So how we do it is that we show to the client using low and medium certainty that those cases are not clear cut, right? We need to go with high only with cases that are clear cut, that we don't have many aspects that we made as question. And many of the elements that we will discuss in the meeting today, you will see, will be affected by that, right? So as these SDRs, we need to be aware of those situations where maybe someone could argue that this case is okay, the other would argue for poor, and we have then to evaluate things. We need to make sure that we adhere to the guidelines, that we have actual reasons from the guidelines to discuss those two ratings, but in the end, we need to decide one of them. We can't just be on the fence. And the client won't always have the perfect answer for us, because each case presents its nuances, right? And it's important to understand that for the client, it's important that we have the best rating possible and not the perfect one, right? And this comes from a place where they understand the subjectiveness that will commonly play a role here in AQR. And we need to also have this in mind. We need to always be thoughtful that even our KPIs for quality, and when we say quality, we're not only talking about ER quality, we're talking about the data set quality, because in the end, what TELUS delivers to the client are full data sets of each language rated by both SERs and ERs. The rating from SERs is used to rate the quality of the data set for them to understand if that's good data for them to use and how should they use it to train and to fine tune their models, right? So we need to be aware of that, and understanding it, I think, will make you more flexible to deal with the day to day and with the hard cases. You know, we have hard cases. It doesn't mean the low is the solution and we go for that. We need to have the discussions to decide on which side of the low we go, but then we go with the low. And that, and the important thing is that we decide on the best way to teach the model on what is actually relevant to be presented, because in the end, that's what we're doing here. We're measuring the quality of the ad in terms of its relevance to the user, right? And once we had a conversation with Mayan, and maybe I can do a parenthesis just following up on that, on who is Mayan, but Mayan is the final client that usually give us the final answer on what we actually want in the project. They are the ones that are actually hired Ewok team, and Ewok hired us. And um, I'm sorry, I just got a note here to stay in the call because I'm alone. But and Mayan, once I asked her what was the difference, right, in between relevance and usefulness, because the guideline, they use it uses this both these two terms, right? Allow me a moment just to show that section of the guideline here. And as you already know, it really clearly, in really from a long time, um, in this. project, we are here to evaluate usefulness, right? And guideline says in this task you evaluate the usefulness. So once I asked Mayan what is actually the difference or actually the relation of usefulness and relevance, we use those two terms and we don't actually clarify the difference, right? So summarizing her answer is that they are both kind of synonym in this project. We're focusing relevance is understanding what is useful for the user. And understanding what's useful, as we discussed in the last meeting, and now actually we didn't discuss. I just I just presented from our material. But again, as I mentioned today, we're focusing on usefulness. That's what we're evaluating if it's relevant. So just going back to where I was before, we're here to evaluate the quality of the ad in terms of that usefulness, in terms of what the user expects, and what they express in terms of what they need and what they expect from the query, right? So after all that's introduction, all that said and done, let's start just reviewing some parts of the guidelines so that we are aligned. Just give me a second to drink a sip of water. And let's start with the refresher here. I'm gonna go a little bit quick because the time is short, and I believe this kind of introduction, this kind of contextual information that I'm presenting is the more relevant part for you to actually be prepared to the role and to the changes in the mindset that you need to have when you transition from the ER position to the SER position. Remember, ER are operations, so ER does it does the numbers, the production in large numbers. We have a bigger team of ERs than SERs, right? So from SERs, we are also working basically in production, but we need to have the mindset that the data that we produce is the data that evaluates our internal data produced from ERs to then decide on other elements that need to be reviewed. For example, if a larger amount of data from the same data set needs to be also rated by the SERs. That is decided based on the original quality of the data set, measured also from the data of the SERs, right? And then you might ask, but how do we know if the actual data from the quality data from the SERs is good? And that we only know after the data is actually used by the model and we see the results, right? Google measures then the quality of the results after the new fine tuning whenever the data set is applied and implemented. And we only know that we had cases, two data sets since we started with the SER team. We had two data sets, and you can imagine we deliver if sometimes a few per week, sometimes even more than five per week. It depends only for AQR data sets. And we had only two cases that we actually received feedback that our data was not improving the program, the model, I mean, but instead making it not get better in evaluating ads. And in all the other data sets, as far as we know, we only received positive feedback that the data we provide as ER program, I mean, right, the ERs and the CRs, that the data didn't make the model get better. So I think that overall we're doing pretty good, right? But understanding all this context is what makes us perform better, right? So that's why I might sometimes kind of diverge from the original topic that I'm discussing and presenting here to you, but it's only to make sure that you have the whole information and that we have the best context possible for when you start training with Leanne and um, for when you do exams and also after approved from when you start working in production with us, right? And honestly, I'm really excited and looking forward. I'm really, really looking forward to having you all in our team. So let's go into a bit of AQR. Let me just give you a second because in these meetings where I don't have you here, I'm just gonna tell you a secret. It's kind of hard to keep the proper speed, right? So please be comprehensible with that. Good thing you can pause me and go back if it's too tedious sometimes, right? But I'll make sure to cover the most that I can. So, um, the first thing I think it's good to for us to align on the basics of how we do query, how we do search, how we interpret, how we research, right? And one of the things that we need to align right away is on what we use and what we don't use when we are evaluating Google SERP, right? So for that query, what is SEO? Nowadays, different only from that presentation, it's almost, especially for informational queries, but not only for those, that we get this general view from AI, right? I think here you're seeing mine in Portuguese, part of the SEO, like here, just because of my VPN. So allow me a moment to adjust it. Okay. While I'm connecting, I'm gonna continue. And besides that, we have other snippets. We have the knowledge snippet here in the site. We have the frequent asked questions. Then we have some of the text ads, right? The texts here that are, as we say, organic. We don't have many that are not. So let me search something a little bit more commercial then so that we can have um, some cases that are more useful for us to talk about. Let me just change region to US West. Okay, let me update this one. Still not going. Just a second. Still not. Let me start a new tab. Wow, why is this? Maybe I need to close Chrome. I don't know why it's still showing Brazil. Allow me a moment. This is something that sometimes you also guys might need to do, right? So English region, current region, this is what we should keep because then you should update once we change regions, right? Maybe it's possible because I didn't restart the whole Chrome window. Maybe that's a good practice to also implement. Let me try to refresh. Okay, now I'm refreshing and here are the results. Now we have it. And as we see, we have the sponsored pay part with products. We have Nordstrom, Women's Heal. We have things to know again. We have again popular products, and we have questions. We have deals, questions. So we also have a series here. there was a period in time in which this one was like above in the results. It was tricky to deal with, so we also had to deal with time sensitive questions, and we also need to be aware of that because when we did the query and when we did the eval, the query heals had the series just like in the first top two or three results. And nowadays it's way below, right? Because it's not as famous. It didn't got so much wind, I would say. But yeah, on when we look to the SERP, we have product sponsored, but it's not only those that say sponsored that we need to disregard. We need to also disregard these popular products, parts, these deals, parts. All of these are basically shopping ads, right? This section right here. It's basically that. And this model right here that is delivering this result for this given query is the model that we are training, right? This is the actual second version that got gets launched since we started with the program. So directly after those two launches, we were mentioned. We were, I mean, all of us, the ER program as a whole was mentioned as part of the improvement of these models in not delivering egregious the results. And this comment is also important because it gives context in what is important for the client. And maybe now you understand a little bit on why we have these KPIs really focused on egregious, right? They're also focused on good, but if I had to say something is that egregious is more important than good, exactly because the client wants both things and both things that are measured by recall and precision, right? They want to not deliver cases that are egregious, and they want to make sure that they deliver cases that are not egregious. And that's why the fine line between poor and egregious is one of the most important and discussed subjects in the project, right? And basically, as this is the model we're training, we can't use the data from the model we're training to learn about the interpretation of the user, of what the user wants. I mean, this model is already showing the result, the interpretation that we're seeing in Get, most likely, right? So it I mean, I don't need to say the opposite, right? It's clear that this would not help train the model. So that's why we ignore any of the interpretations that come from shopping ads, meaning product, sponsored, and other results that show in the alt ad. One of the things that we do, and to make it easier for us, is to use this new function here that shows web that basically removes all those products, deals, and other results. Sometimes we also have images, videos, right, in the middle of the results. It will depend on the nature of the query. So this view here from the using this web tab here, you will filter off those results, and it's easier for us to use the part of the SERP that we actually need to use to interpret the user, right? But just a quick reminder of something that I already said like 100 times in 1 hour and 20 minutes. That is, we can't forget the human interpretation, right? So if we see low likelihood interpretations that are not shown here, but that we can clearly see, then we need to consider that. I think that one good example to bring up here that most of you might remember is the bottom. It's metal bottom. I think you all are probably remembering this one. So when we look at this, we look at the SERP interpretation, and we see only these kind of buttons that are not exactly like that kind of button that was showing in the advertisement, right? Most of them here are not the same as that one, right? But then, um, it's at the same time, it was something like this, right? So we do see it showing up here. So it's already an indicative of a low likelihood interpretation. But let's pretend that this case was not showing up here. The name of the product that the ad was offering, that was this product that is here in highlighted in the right part with the happy birthday. It was metal button, right? So it's it's how can we say no, that's not the metal button that the user is looking for? I mean, I don't want to be using lingo from EM terminology like syntactic match, right? But fundamentally, that's what it is, and uh, how can we disregard that possibility, right? We can't say, no, the user does not want that. Not in this case. There are cases in which we can say, no, the user eh, does not want that, and it would be ridiculous to show. But that's not the case here. We can't say that. So offering these kind of buttons here that we see here, although we see that the majority of the other results here to the right here, right, and above, when I scroll here, right, none of those are similar to this. But even then, we don't disregard that interpretation. We go for the poor. And we say sometimes, wow, but that's too low. Yeah, that's too low, but it's still a poor low, right? And one thing that I like to mention from the guidelines is the section and the actual concept of egregious. Because if we look at the concept of egregious, it clearly states that it needs to be one of two things. It needs to be either useless to the user, and because of the possible interpretations, we can't say that this is useless, or it needs to be out of place or ridiculous when shown, right? And showing a metal button for a user that only mentioned metal button, it would be going too far to say that it is egregious, right? It is out of place, I mean, or ridiculous. So that's why we wouldn't say in that case that is egregious, because we are considering the low likelihood interpretation, and we can't disregard and go against the guidelines, right? That's the primary source of instruction for how we approach things. And if the ad fits a low likelihood interpretation of the query, you rated it as poor. It doesn't say poor or egregious, depending on the interpretation. On make your best judgment. It doesn't say anything like that, right? It's poor. If it addresses a low likelihood interpretation, it's poor. And also, I think that the challenge here comes when, like, different to this case of the metal button, when it doesn't show up at all, this interpretation of metal button, right? There are cases in which the interpretation that the ad brings does not show up at all in the search results, but our human interpretation, and that's why the exercise from the previous video is so important. Understanding that the structure of the query represents something, that the choice of leaving a word, a letter in a capital letter in the beginning of the word, maybe it's not as unintentional, right? It kind of points out to the dominant interpretation or things like that. These are exercises that we can do, right? We have the freedom to explore the user interpretation as deep as we can. As the only important thing that we need to be take care of is to not dive in the red hole, as we call it, right? We can dive to understand the possibilities, but we can start going to the wonderland and imagining possibilities. Then we start going too far. Then it's justifying, not egregious, right? So it's a fine line. And I hope that this meeting helps us align a bit on some elements that we take into consideration. But mostly the discussions that we'll have also when I'm back, for sure we'll have other meetings and discussions to align on topics and things to make sure that we are as in the same page as we can be. Okay, so going back to the refresher, I think on the query interpretation I was really deep, but because this is really more than 50% of what we need to be aware of, right? And then we have another big topic for discussion, the difference between text and shopping ads. For SERs, we need to be clear. For shopping ads, we're always expecting a product. Does it mean that if it offers a service for prescription of weight loss pills, that we will lower the rating or say unrateable because it's not a normal regular product page but rather it's just a subscription page? No, our job is to focus on relevance, right? So if the pill prescription is a great fit in terms of relevance for the user, we go good just the same, right? For shopping ads, the ad is crafted by the Google model itself. It gets the offer title, the offer description from the page. So that's why when there is conflict, like if the information of the ad creative said this says that the user will get something that they don't, we say it's unrateable because then there was an issue in there in the page that we were evaluating, right? Or the page is no longer available, which is usually the case for shopping ads because one case that happens more often than not is the user search for a used car. I don't know. They search for a specific vehicle, and the offer is for a specific used car. So it's a unique offer. Once that car gets sold, that page will be deactivated because it's a unique offer. That car have a specific mileage, a specific number of previous owners, and all these things, and it's unique. So that page will be deactivated. And once we get that page after this deactivation, sometimes we get notified of a software error or something like that, but usually what happens is that we just get to the search page of that same dealership, offering many other cars, and maybe some of them are relevant or not, more relevant or less. And the question relies, how do we treat that, right? And if, as we're discussing here, a shopping ad, the ad creative will be saying that you're selling a 1998 Ford Cruiser. I don't know, right? Something like that. And when we get there, it's not offering us that. And that's something that it's labeled in the guidelines as misleading, but it's more to say there's something wrong with here, right? But it's not only that. Because although Google makes a lot of things to kind of make it impossible for it to happen in a shopping ad exactly because it's automatically collected from the product page, sometimes it does happen. And I think you all remember a case that we even brought up, someone brought up here in the discussions, at least for the America EMEA sessions. And you will remember this one because the ad creative had implied that it took the user to the AutoZone page, but it was actually another parts dealership, and that's misleading, right? So sometimes it actually fits the word misleading. Sometimes it's more just an issue of conflicting the information from the ad creative and the page. In both those situations, we go with the unrateable, right? Because it reflects an issue in shopping ads, right? Obviously, there are some nuances. We have the software of wars that we treat differently. I believe you know at this point. We use then the ad creative exactly as a reference to rate what is being offered, right? So we can get on a conclusion of what was the relevance of the product that was being offered. And here, with describing this, I'm kind of also implying some of the importance of the special instructions, right? It's not something that we disregard. So when the rules fit perfectly or fit really well, or when it serves as a really good uh, source of instruction of how we approach certain situations, that's what we do, right? So this is one of the biggest difference on shopping, right? Um, and then we talk about text ads, and this is the real tricky one, right? Because text ads are crafted by the advertiser. So the advertiser is the one decided what's in the expanded line one and two. And then we have this misleading discussion. What is actually misleading? The simple way to say that is how the guideline describe it is that misleading is implies it takes the user to a different landing page than it actually does. It would be an egregious experience. So I think that I need to highlight here that one feedback from the client that we received at some point is that we were using misleading as a reason too more frequently than it should be to justify the egregious rating, right? Because in text ads, then we say misleading or egregious exactly because of the fact that it is crafted by the advertiser, right? Because the advertiser need to follow a set of rules to craft the ad creatives, and they are not, if they are trying to trick the user, it goes against the policies that they need to follow when crafting these ads, and that's why we rate them as egregious, right? But not only that, because I mean, the soul of AQR is relevance, is usefulness. And if we allow the advertiser to treat the user in terms of relevance, that's the opposite of what we want to offer the user. In AQR, the center is the user. We want to make sure that the user gets satisfied, right? That's what a good ad is. So, the observation here is the rating needs to consider both the LP and the ad creative to evaluate the user experience. It can be a store, a service, a product, a blog. It's just about diversity of types of data that we receive in text ads, right? And obviously, from the diversity of results that we can get, we will also get a diversity of queries that is bigger, right? For a more broad set of necessities that the user will imply. It doesn't mean that the user only requires product, only asks for products in shopping, right? But especially for text, we see an even greater variety of queries. Um, I think that it's also important and a good point here to talk a little bit about extra navigation, right? Extra navigation is a really tricky subject, but let's think of the fact that when we're rating usefulness, we're rating the reasonable distance and the expected distance. So when we are expecting to buy to get a product, if I step further than exactly the product page, I'm already as uh, farther than I expected from a perfect experience with a product search, right? So that's why extra navigation it makes us need to lower the rating, right? We are at that adding navigational distance. But then this is for shopping ads. When we're discussing text ads, I just said that this is created by the advertiser. So it's unreasonable to expect that the advertiser would create ads for every single product page. And that's why you see a difference in approach from okay and poor, especially when we're differentiating text and shopping ads. Because for shopping ads, if I need to lead the landing page, most likely, like the absolute majority of the cases, it would be a poor case because we're adding a distance that is not a perfect description of a good experience for the user, right? And um, but it's not always the case because there are for text ads, if I'm looking for and this comes from the guidelines actually, this is the example that we always list to justify this approach. Is here the example that we have for text ads in 10 funnel next sweater, right? In text ads, if I ask for a 10 funnel next sweater and I get just freepeople.com, that is a homepage, I'm still not getting any specific product necessarily. It might be that when I rate it, a 10 funnel neck is on the homepage, and then maybe I will choose the good. And but overall, if it's just the homepage and I'm not seeing any offer for a 10 funnel neck sweater, for shopping ads, if I'm not getting the 10 funnel neck exactly in the landing page, I will most likely go for either egregious or poor, depending on the usefulness. But for text ads, if I can find the 10 funnel next letter in the page that I need, I can still say it's a positive experience. I would not expect that the advertised created an ad for each product and then I got the ad for exactly the 10 funnel next letter that was crafted by the advertiser, right? So that's why, and that's one important difference when we're evaluating text and shopping ads, right? Um, so this is just something that I've been saying a lot. Just the focus and the goal of the project, the usefulness in and of the offering from the user's perspective, right? The basic dimensions. So we have the interpretation of the query, the closeness of intent, the non-negotiables, suitability and commercial intent. So one important thing to highlight on this basic dimensions, I mean, everything is important to highlight, but about interpretation, I think that we covered already. Closeness of intent, we're discussing basically the nearby intent. I think it's the most difficult topic when we're discussing closeness of intent, right? I think that everyone understand alternatives because they say they serve the same goal that the user want to address, right? It's just an alternative and not exactly the one that the user searched for, but the result of what the offer is offering and what the user looked for is the same. They serve the same purpose. So that's an alternative. And then we have good and bad alternatives. Bad alternatives will be poor, good alternatives will be okay. Substitutes will never be good, right? This is also something clarified from the guidelines. So if the user searched for my specific brand, only that specific brand will be good. Another brand will at best be okay. But then we have nearby intent. And nearby intent is a bit tricky. It's not easy to navigate. And recently, some materials were created and we discussed with the client. And in the end, the decision from the client is to not leave artifacts created to serve as extra guidelines because they should be only like the description of the discussion itself in the SERs from the SERs, but not necessarily extra guidance, right? Nearby intent is something that makes sense to go together. It's not exactly what the user intended, but it makes sense. And for me, the best example, and this is also from my cultural background, from my in the personal background, but electric guitar and oh my god, the electric guitar and the electric. Oh my god, what's the thing he uses to guitar? Why did it escape my mind? The electric guitar and the what is the thing that you use with the electric guitar, guys? Electric guitar and amplifier. Oh my god. So the amplifier for me is the best example of a nearby intent. It's arguably okay to offer uh, uh, an amplifier for someone looking for an electric guitar. I think it goes so well together, but I mean, so well. But I mean, we would still go with the poor most of the cases because it's not serving the same end, right? It's serving a different one, but it makes sense to offer. It's not ridiculous, and it has a chance to be useful for the user. And that's what a nearby intent is, right? So a running shoe and um, some sole for the shoe that works for running, for improvement of running. Um, I don't know, right? Things that go together, and I think you understand when we describe this way. And I know that it would be better to have a more objective, like it's an accessory, right? And something that we've been saying, and the client is really supportive of our saying, and actually we started saying because that's what they said to us is this is a hard work. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy, right? We will struggle to get to the same unified conclusion. And our objective in the end is to continue to make the model better. And while we're doing this, we're succeeding, right? And that's the goal. Right. And that comes on the other part of the role from the SCRs, that is to keep active discussions to make sure that we're actually delivering to the model data that will make it better, right? So if we have alignments that are making me generate something as poor that I strongly feel should be okay, it's on my responsibility to bring the discussion further. I need to flag it to the word. I need to make sure, right? Obviously, if we have good reasons to say to you that we need to align in the poor, and even if you feel it's okay, it should be poor. Uh, we also need to let go and sometimes align. Not, I must say, we won't be majority. We won't be in the majority most of the time. Sometimes we need to let go, and this is something for me that makes the role even more interesting, right? And I hope you also enjoy all of that. So I'm gonna jump the parts on the interpretation of the query. I think I already covered this a lot. This exercise here, things to do in Lisbon, kind of made me remember of something that I think it's good to mention to you. So, for example, we have cases where the user is looking for tickets, and sometimes they provide the origin and the destiny. Sometimes they just provide the destiny. And whatever the elements of the query that were added by the user, we consider that they should be addressed for us to give it the good, right? So if the user only mentioned the destiny, we need to find tickets from wherever, right? Because the VPN will most likely influence the origin that is set whenever it's not already filled in by the ad. But if the destination is correct and the user only add the destination, then we can go with the good because all elements of the query were addressed. If the user is only looking for the flight ticket, then that's the dominant intent, right? I'm not trying to. Obviously, we have other elements to evaluate, but just thinking of a hypothetical. I believe you understand what I mean when I say this, right? But let's always think like that, right? For if the element was added by the user to the query, it means there is something that we need to address to consider something to be good. Non-negotiable elements. Non-negotiable is a really important part of the guidelines, and I think that the most important aspect of it that I need to make sure I highlight to you is that when the non-negotiable is not addressed, it can still be poor. I'm probably you didn't get here with great performances that you had so far without understanding this, but I know this is something that happened in the past. So just to clarify, a non-negotiable can still be poor and it can still be egregious, right? So if I asked for a shoe of color green, uh, maybe the color is not the non-negotiable. So if it's not addressed, it can still be okay, or it won't be good because, as I just said, if the color is added there, is intentional, and for us to consider it good, all the elements need to be addressed. But if it's not uh, addressed, and let's suppose then it's another element that is not only the color green, but even the color green can be a non-negotiable. For example, if the shoe was not any shoe, it was a prom shoe, a green prom sandals. I don't know, not sandals, green prom heel. So, person searching for a green prom heel, it's it, the color, it's not just a color anymore, right? Because for that person, probably her outfit depends on a green shoe or an alternative to green shoe, and without knowing the rest, we can know for sure. So the green becomes a non-negotiable in this query, right? It's already something that we need to think of. And maybe then it's offering a silver dress. And okay, now it's a different product. It's not in green, but it's a prom dress. So now, can I say, obviously, shoe is a non-negotiable, right? But can I say it's egregious? Not necessarily. But then not necessarily. I mean, there are arguments that it could still be poor, and I don't want to go too deep in that. But what I actually want to discuss is maybe there comes a pair of prom heels that are really exquisite, and they are pink neon, right? And with some details in gold that have some branches and some bats, you know? It's still a prom heel, but it's like more like for a Halloween. So it kind of goes totally against. I know I am exaggerating, but I'm doing that on purpose to show that it's not because some elements are filled that I'm gonna say it's not egregious. I can still go for the egregious, right? And I'm trying to show how even just the color has nuances to the point where it can be just an element that is not a non-negotiable, or it can be a non-negotiable that, if not addressed, leads to poor, or in some cases even to egregious, right? So it's just a breakdown, and I think that in the end, the conclusion that you always get is that we're focusing and a lot on usefulness, on understanding what the user wants, on evaluating the usefulness of the ad in the context of the research, right? If it makes sense to go together. So if the user is searching for a nail, uh, I would say nail forward. Um, this it's nail as well, right? So the user is searching for this nail for wood, and you offer them a screw, like um, a screwdriver. Yeah, was and we offer them a screwdriver that's useless for nails, right? But if we offer them a hammer, then we're talking, right? We're talking about something that it's not egregious to go together. We're all only discussing tools, but the screwdriver would be egregious and the hammer would not, right? But on the other hand, if the user was actually looking for screws and then we offered them a hammer, then it's again egregious, right? So I think you can see from what I'm describing here that the sole end of what we do is discuss usefulness to its core, right? It's really to think on if it makes sense for what the user is looking for to offer this, and keep in mind that when the user is searching something in Google, the results they get it affect their trust in Google, right? And at the same time, we want to offer them ads because this pays the bills to for Google, right? So think of how can we offer ads that are actually useful for the user? That's the question that I believe originally led to the creation of the project that we work on. And it's with still with that same intent in mind that we rate every day and that I hope that you also incorporate to your ratings. Right. We have many other topics from the guidelines that we can still cover and we will cover moving on hopefully ahead, but these are the most important that I listed already for us to discuss a little bit, right? um, you already have great results. So I think that most of these things that I told you are not any novelty for you. I believe that in a way or the other, you already understand this. Maybe you would describe it in not in the same exact same way, but I think that overall we could cover a lot of ground. And this is it for this week. And next week, then we start the meetings with Leanne. Don't worry, she's a really nice, easygoing person. You will love her. And just when you're asked to talk, be mindful, right? If possible, if it's possible to prepare, be prepared. If she asks you to say, I don't know, the movie you like, whatever, think of it, right? Don't be not prepared. Sometimes you will be the first, so it's also understandable if you need to think for a bit. But be cool, breathe, you'll be fine. And also, at the same time that you need to be prepared, do not overspeak. Do not think longer than needed. Do not extrapolate. Do not speak for 5 minutes in a meeting of 60 minutes just when it's introduction. Right? Sometimes it's needed, but if it's not the case measured, just speak what's necessary to also allow the meeting to flow as she plans to do, right? Possibly for this first meeting, it's gonna be a little bit more relaxed and nothing much serious to do, but it's possible that right from the start, she brings up with a calibration round and some ratings for you to do. So take your time, but not too much. Be aware of your rating speed, and you will do great. I can't go much longer, but thank you so much, team. I wish you the best. Anything you need, just reach out to the AQR leadership in Abel, Niall, or Tony. Right? I won't be here next week, but on Friday I will start coming back and. I mean, on Friday the 20th, and on the 23rd, officially, I'll be fully. Beck, and whatever I'm maybe supporting you, please anytime just reach out. I'll be here. Enjoy your times in this training, learn a lot, and although I know that you're already great AQR raters, so anything you need, please let us know, and we'll be here to support you on your journey to officially becoming an SCR with us. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of week. See you. Bye bye.